In a small, tranquil village nestled between towering mountains and dense woods, lived a young woman named Enma. She was the pride of her village, a beacon of light to everyone who knew her. Her beauty was unmatched, but it was her heart and intelligence that captured the deepest admiration. The villagers often spoke of her in reverent tones, with some calling her the future of their community. Enma's days were filled with both joy and hardship. She lived with her mother, who was known for her tireless work at the market, selling vegetables to make ends meet. Enma's father had passed when she was just a child, but his memory was still alive in the stories he had told her, stories of strength, kindness, and dreams that transcended the ordinary. Her brothers worked the fields, but Enma's dream had always been different. She had a thirst for knowledge, and she wanted to be a teacher, to spread wisdom far beyond the borders of the village. Her ambition was something that brought her both admiration and, unbeknownst to her, envy. Ada, Enma's childhood friend, had always been in her shadow. Where Enma shone, Ada faded. Where Enma was praised, Ada was overlooked. And though they had once been close, time had turned their bond into something darker. Ada's jealousy grew with each passing year, a silent poison that twisted her heart. She watched Enma's every move with growing bitterness, resenting her friend's beauty, grace, and the affection of the villagers. Meanwhile, far away, in a neighboring land, a man named Uch ruled his territory with fear. Known for his cruel and manipulative ways, Uch was a tyrant who made his living by terrorizing others. He kidnapped young women, selling them into forced marriages to further his power, and his name alone sent chills through the spines of those who heard it. He was a man without compassion, driven by lust for control and dominance. His evil deeds were whispered in every village, but no one dared to confront him. One day, Uch's eyes turned to Enma. He heard of her beauty and ambition, and he coveted her like a predator stalking its prey. A man like him did not like to be denied, and he believed that such a radiant, intelligent woman would be the perfect addition to his collection of victims. Ada, consumed by her jealousy, saw an opportunity in Uch's gaze. She no longer saw Enma as a friend but as a rival, someone who needed to be taken down. When Uch approached her with a sinister offer, promising power and riches in exchange for betraying Enma, Ada didn't hesitate. Her envy overpowered her sense of loyalty, and she agreed to help Uch capture Enma. She told him of Enma's routines, her paths through the village, the times she would wander into the forest or return from the market. That night, as Enma made her way home, the air felt heavy with an unsettling quiet. The moon hung high in the sky, but something felt wrong, as if the world itself held its breath. Enma, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, walked through the forest, the smell of damp earth filling her senses. Suddenly, from the trees, Uch and his henchmen sprang forward, their hands seizing her before she could even scream. "Your friend helped in your kidnap," Uch sneered, his voice laced with cruelty. "She sold you out for a promise of wealth." The words sent a shock through Enma's heart, but they were not the ones that broke her. It was the fact that they came from Ada, the person she had once called a sister. The betrayal burned deep, more than the ropes that bound her, more than the cold steel of the chains they placed around her wrists. Enma was dragged through the forest, her spirit faltering with each step. The forest, once a place of solace and reflection for her, now felt like a prison. She was taken to Uch's hideout, a desolate, dark place, where the stench of rot and decay filled the air. She could hear the distant cries of other women, their voices full of despair. But Enma was not broken, not yet. Days passed, and Uch's plans grew clearer. He intended to marry Enma against her will, to force her into submission as his prize. He took pleasure in watching her struggle, in knowing that his cruelty had reduced her to a mere object to be owned. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On the day Uch had set for their union, the sky darkened, and the winds began to howl. The air grew heavy, thick with an unnatural tension. As Uch's preparations for the wedding began, a strange rain began to fall. But it was not ordinary rain. The droplets were crimson, as though the heavens themselves were weeping for Enma's suffering. The villagers, sensing the ominous signs, gathered at the edges of the forest, pleading for Enma's release. But Uch, blinded by his own arrogance, refused to heed the warnings. He pressed on with his plans, dismissing the rain as mere coincidence, a natural phenomenon. But the gods were watching. Their patience, long tested, had finally worn thin. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning streaked through the sky, crashing down with deafening force, striking Uch's hideout and reducing it to rubble. The walls crumbled, the earth shook, and Uch, the man who had terrorized so many, was consumed by the very fire he had unleashed. The world seemed to pause for a heartbeat before the storm subsided, leaving only the silence of destruction in its wake. Enma, though shaken, was unharmed. As the dust settled, she found herself alone in the wreckage, her chains shattered by the force of the divine wrath. The moment she realized she was free, the weight of her betrayal, Ada's betrayal, hit her like a wave. But she would not let it break her. She ran back to her village, her heart pounding in her chest, but not from fear. Her steps were driven by a sense of purpose, a yearning to reclaim her life, her dreams, and her future. When she arrived, the villagers gathered around her, shocked by the tale she shared. The betrayal, the cruelty of Uch, and the divine wrath that had claimed him, it was all too much to comprehend. Ada, once Enma's friend, now stood among them, her face pale with guilt and regret. The villagers, who had once seen Ada as one of their own, now turned their backs on her. Her envy had cost her not only her friendship but the trust of an entire community. The weight of her actions crushed her, and she knew that there was no way to undo the damage she had caused. But Enma, in a quiet act of grace, chose forgiveness. She understood the destructive power of jealousy, how it could consume even the kindest heart if left unchecked. Ada had fallen victim to her own insecurities, her own desires. Though the pain of betrayal would never truly fade, Enma chose to let go of the anger that had threatened to consume her as well. As Ada stood before her, a broken figure, Enma offered her forgiveness not for Ada's sake, but for her own. To hold on to hatred would be to let the past continue to control her, and she refused to let that happen. Ada, in turn, collapsed at Enma's feet, her sobs echoing in the quiet village square. In the days that followed, Enma's strength and compassion became a beacon of hope to the village. They rebuilt, not just their homes, but their relationships, their trust, and their faith. Enma, now more than ever, was determined to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. Her resolve had been tempered by the flames of her trials, and she knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But she had survived, and that was enough. In another village, far away, a different tale unfolded. Akin, a young man from humble beginnings, had left his village in search of a better life. With the help of a generous benefactor, he built a future for himself abroad. He flourished, and when the time came, he decided to give back to his family. He sent money home, enough to build a house for his brother Kunli, who had remained in the village. But greed is a powerful force, and Kunli, blinded by his desire for wealth, embezzled the funds meant for the construction of the house. He cut corners, pocketing the rest for himself. The house, though outwardly grand, was a death trap, built on deceit and lies. When Akin returned, proud of the house he had built for his family, Kunli accepted it with a hollow smile, guilt festering within him. He knew that the house was a lie, a monument to his greed, but he could not bring himself to confess. Then disaster struck. A fierce storm ravaged the village, and the house that had been built on lies was reduced to rubble. Kunli's deceit was exposed, and the villagers turned against him, their whispers filled with scorn and judgment. Akin, devastated by his brother's betrayal, faced a difficult choice. He could turn his back on Kunli, or he could forgive him and help him rebuild not just the house, but his character. Akin chose forgiveness. He helped Kunli rebuild, offering not only his hands but his heart, understanding that redemption could only come through grace. The stories of Enma and Akin remind us that justice and mercy go hand in hand. While betrayal can leave deep scars, it is forgiveness that heals the soul. Through trials and heartbreak, both Enma and Akin emerged stronger, their spirits tempered by the fires of adversity. And in their stories, we are reminded that no matter how dark the world may seem, the light of compassion will always find its way through.